Hi, everyone, and welcome to our eTail Insights webinar that's sponsored by OneScreen.ai. Our topic today is why measurable out-of-home advertising is the missing piece to your D2C marketing mix. Today, we are joined by three amazing speakers from OneScreen.ai and Hexclad. So now I'm going to pass it over to Charlie.
Thanks, Randy. I appreciate it. Thanks for the intro. I'm actually outnumbered by a couple Wisconsin Badgers here, but I'm really happy to talk about marketing in general and out of home specifically with a few marketing experts. So why don't we kick it over to you, Cam? You could start. Maybe just give us a little bit about your background, and then if you don't mind talking a little bit about Hexclad's background.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I'm Cam Bush, head of advertising over at Hexclad. My background is in paid media and media buying. Have started on the outside with Hexclad as a consultant, and since came in with Connor Rolane, our head of growth. So we kind of pair up on the growth side of Hexclad's business. Me focused in paid media, him focused in kind of overall marketing ops. And in the last couple of years, we've been able to scale. I mean, year over year, in the hundreds of percents. Fairly effectively and incredibly profitably. We like to think of ourselves as being some of the best in the business in paid media and marketing mix, as well as measurement. So yeah, really delighted to be here today and chat about out of home.
Thanks, Cam. Yeah, your trajectory's been wildly impressive. So we can't wait to dig in and learn a little bit more. Want to jump over to my colleague Greg, and one of the co-founders and the chief commercial officer at OneScreen. Greg, can you give us a little bit of background of yourself, but also just how OneScreen started?
Yeah, and Cam, great to see you. Thanks for joining us today. Excited to dig in here. And to Charlie's point, yes, being two Wisconsin alum is arguably the most important piece to this whole thing. So. Shout out to any other Badgers out there. And if anybody wants to talk the state of their football team, let Cam and I know, because we have a lot to say. On the business side of things, let's see, my co-founders and myself here at OneScreen, we're actually former early stage HubSpot guys. And I always like to tell the story because we started HubSpot back in 2010, and we basically sold against things like billboards, right? The juxtaposition between inbound marketing and essentially a billboard was pretty massive. And we were selling against it, telling people to do this new thing. Rode the wave, went public, had great exits. It was successful and exciting. I personally went into commercial real estate after my time in SaaS, where I was introduced to physical, tangible assets. With my love of marketing and then my new love of real estate, those two things come together, it equals out-of-home advertising, not a medium that myself or really my peers and folks I've worked with knew much about. And that was what was really intriguing. And this was late 2019. So my co-founders and I got together, started to look at the out-of-home market, and identified that there might be an opportunity here to modernize the space, while also sort of seeing a shift in the way digital marketing was becoming a little bit less effective. That was at that time, right? And now we're seeing more challenges in digital marketing, and a lot of the older forms of advertising are now taking center stage again. How to modernize that and how to bring in really smart, sophisticated marketers like Cam and his team into this world in a more sophisticated way to continue the momentum and growth that they're seeing already. That's us.
Thanks, yeah, and it's been great to be a part of as the head of marketing at OneScreen. It's been interesting to talk to other marketers about using measurable out of home as part of their overall mix, and I think we can get into some of that. But I want to start with going back. We just talked about two incredible marketing brands, HubSpot, Hexclad, as the founding point. Can we talk about marketing as a whole, though, and kind of where you see the marketing world today, not just out of home and maybe digital, but just holistically? And Cam, maybe we could start with you, but just your viewpoint on just marketing in general, where it is in today's world.
Yeah, I think marketing in general and then D2C is maybe like a separate conversation entirely. But it's a good thing. I think D2C is what really pushes the forefront of marketing as a whole. I think it requires you to be more measured, more entrepreneurial, significantly more agile, because you just don't have the benefit of generally, at least, a retail backstop, and there's no baked in revenue unless you're running ads and getting people to your site, unless you're really, really lucky. The overall state, I think, is a bit of a pendulum right now. DTC specifically, I think, swung from, top of funnel, spend a ton, Facebook's the coolest thing I've ever seen, to, oh no, like ROAS is king. Like, where's my best one-day click coming from? And now we're kind of settling into mid next swing of, all right, what's MMM? What's incrementality? How do I drive this business into the future without, doing the cutting off the nose to spite the face metric of ROAS all the time, moving towards who's already ready to buy you, and then kind of losing out on that awareness category. I think the channels and everything have changed a lot, at least in name only. But ultimately the same marketing message of maybe even the 70s, 80s, and 90s of awareness, interest, and getting people to like you is kind of all the same thing. It's just got different ways to buy it, and different ways to measure it. And out of home is, I guess, always been around. It was the OG, whether it's a magazine, a letter, or a billboard, or just a kind of little TP outside of a coffee shop that says "come on in." It's all an advertising and marketing expenditure. And as far as the state goes, I think in that pendulum swing, we've maybe moved a little too far towards optimizable and particularly immediately measurable channels in the D2C world. And we might be missing out on some of that traditional marketing side of, be it out of home, linear TV. There's a lot of other channels that don't fit into a lot of D2C companies' core competencies that are still out there. And this is one of them for us. And I think in the D2C world, not having a physical presence means you're always limited to attention with people who are on screens, and that time is also limited, and there's probably an activity going on that they would rather be doing than watching your ad. Whereas the out-of-home world is kind of hitting people when they're not engaged on a screen, or maybe not even engaged at all. I don't know how many other people dissociate when driving, but I certainly do. And if I see a cool billboard, it stews with me. And it's also a really nice way for a D2C company to kind of enter the physical world that is not, just through somebody's screen. And maybe it's not your product that becomes tangible, but it does kind of open it up to a new environment. And I think that's really important as we scale up, at least as Hexclad matured. That's why we moved into TV, was, not 100% of the addressable population is going to be on Facebook. And even less of those people are going to want to buy stuff on Facebook. So this is just another way of kind of getting in front of them, personalizing, appearing local, and being a part of that conversation well outside of just the digital realm.
Wow,
Yeah. Sorry, drive.
No, I was gonna
a lot of questions.
Yeah, I was gonna kick it over to you after that, Greg, because you covered a lot of great topics there, Cam. Between the subconscious branding, between the mix of demand and brand, it ties into a lot of what we do. But yeah, Greg would love. I think we could talk for hours about what you just shared. But Greg, what just kind of add to that?
Yeah, it can. Before I jump in, because I have so many thoughts on the sort of the state of the state as it pertains to marketing. On the Hexclad side, like, what does that marketing mix look like today? And then secondly is what's working well, and where do you see maybe some of the gaps?
Yeah, so like our marketing mix is, I would say, we're evergreen across probably 10 to 15 channels. 8 to 10 of those are going to be digital. And then the remaining 5 to 7 are going to be harder to measure, non-deterministic, click-based, whether it be, host-read podcasts, out-of-home, mail, prints and digital prints. There's a big mix, but don't get me wrong, Facebook is still the lion's share of our budget. That's definitely where we have the bias towards, because we can put a dollar in and get a dollar out and be really confident in that every day. Whereas taking like out of home as an example, that's a non-optimizable budget within the period, within the flight date. So if you get it wrong, you can't use that agility that you have in all of your other channels to say, oh no, we overspent, pull back, we can reap this in the next couple of days and fix this. But it's also like, I think that is, to the state of marketing, one of the kind of diseases that we all have is, oh, if like performance is bad for one day or 1 week or 1 month, I should pull out of top of funnel or anything that's not performing, right now. And that's kind of that shrinking sponge that philosophizing marketers will talk about of, if you're not pouring water into the top of the funnel, like good luck catching any out of the bottom. And once you start just draining the bottom and not filling the top, you're going to just kick the can down the road of whatever pain it is that you're feeling. So our marketing mix is generally like 70%, 80% digital. Of that 70 to 80% digital, I would say 80 to 90% optimizable. And then the remainder is going to go towards like less optimizable, whether it be a strategic linear buy, or out of home, mail, all the fun stuff. And that's really where our mix kind of lives. But it has evolved quite a bit. As we've matured, we've tried to find many, many other channels that we can get to, at least 50% of the budget of what we're putting into Facebook. That was really important for us. One, because we don't want to, be just a money printer from Zuckerberg. We really do want to grow a brand and have the awareness well outside of people who are just super digitally native. Cookware is a lifetime product. We have a lifetime warranty. Some buyers are probably 13 and really into cooking and love Gordon's shows. And some buyers are certainly 85 and wanted to get away from their cast iron pan because it was really heavy and they just couldn't handle it anymore. But all of it just kind of centers around the message of, between you don't suck at cooking, your pans suck. And cooking is fun, and it's experimental, and it breaks the norm. And good cooking, is creativity, and a lot of what kind of Gordon is pushing in his shows. I think that valence is really good. So that's kind of the message we're trying to send, just saying it a little differently in every different place.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're hearing a lot of the similar things from other clients and other folks in the DTC space, especially for folks that are turning to channels like out of home for the first time. You know him, but Preston Rutherford, co-founder of Chubbies, is just an excellent follow for other folks who aren't following him on LinkedIn. And he talks about the lessons that he learned while growing Chubbies to a successful exit, and talks now a lot about how brand is critical when growing your business. And he talks a lot about this 95-5 rule. And you mentioned, Cam, the 5, the sort of awareness piece. And that awareness piece has always been taken up by these tried and true ad channels, right? Like TV and the out of home is the oldest form of advertising on the planet, back to, hieroglyphics, writings on the wall, direct mail, for example. We're seeing this sort of like revert back to those channels because now people realize that 5% is important, but that 95% is critical to profitably grow, right? And I think that's like a core difference is what are sort of those tactics that can help grow revenue, but what are the tactics that help also drive profitability? And that's where, a channel like out of home plays really well with the whole mix, right? With the rest of your marketing. It's a rising tide lifts all boats mentality. That's our stance, that's what we're seeing. And that's where we believe out of home shines. It's in conjunction with the other channels that you're using and making those even more efficient. And I do want to go back to one thing you said because it was interesting. You talked about optimization. So one of the things that my co-founders and I realized early on as we're learning about out of home, it's not so much that we believe it can always be direct response. Unless you're using a QR code, that really shouldn't be the intention, right? Part of the intention needs to be getting learnings. The same kinds of learnings that you get when you launch a digital campaign and a week later you can take a look at whether or not you need to pull any levers up, down, left, right. That's never really been possible in out of home. Now, there are some ways that out of home has become more like that. However, we've never had a way to look at a campaign over the course of 4 weeks, as soon as we have statistically significant data, to say whether or not certain formats, certain locations are generating more favorable results than others. And that was one of our perspectives. So we wanted to incorporate that. And first, congratulations on your, the big out-of-home launch that you guys, just launched, which is incredible. But that's one of the things that we're going to talk about, is we're going to talk about what we're seeing in terms of results, mid-campaign, post-campaign, and you're going to have learnings. In each market, you're going to see, did your bus shelters work better than your billboards? Digital outperforms static, right? We're going to be able to lay all of that out, because the idea is actually to be more efficient in your next campaign. It's not to necessarily spend more money, right? It's to be more efficient and make best use of the effective ad dollars. The core difference is that stat sig number, right? In terms of measurement, you launch an out-of-home campaign and it's not something that you want to dial up or dial down a day or two later, right? Because of course, like the classic CFO to marketer launches campaign, CFO is chasing you down 24 hours later, where's the revenue? What's the ROI? And digital gives you the ability to dial that in a short period of time, but out of home, it's inherently different. And you need to have a specific and certain number of reach and frequency in order to have stat sig to then make those adjustments. But that's where we're going. And that's what you guys are going to see, which I'm really excited for you guys, about. And that's the rest of what the rest of our clients see. And we see then those campaigns in existing markets, doubling down where we've seen success, and then entering new markets smarter, more efficiently. And then we see success up and to the right. Those measurable outcomes, that's the whole point. Those learnings influence more campaigns.
I mean, even without OneScreen's like specific measurement tool and like measurement solutions, which I think are kind of what makes DTC marketers more comfortable with this like out-of-home concept, is like, oh, like that looks like my reporting. Like I can actually work within that. I can share it in the same way that I would share, an in-platform Google report. It's all in-platform data, which in our case, we take with many, many grains of salt, and don't tend to worry about. But in a lot of ways, like out of home, even in general, is just a lot easier to measure than you would think, from the kind of general like holdout methodology that is now very much a part of the digital mix of incrementality. And if you really simplify and boil it down to like what is an out-of-home ad, it's in what is your DTC store, imagining there's a coffee shop on a street, and one day they don't have a sign out front, and the next day they do have a sign out front. That's the difference in traffic day over day. You can get pretty accurate. Roughly how many people are coming in every day of the week. In the D2C world, Shopify is going to tell you that data every single minute of every day. Well, what happened in those geos when we had this, agnostic of everything else? Did we get more sales, on that zip code? Do we have more, engagement from that zip code? And we do have somewhat of a retail presence with our Costco Roadshow piece. And that was a really big part of at least our strategy, was giving ourselves an additional backstop of how do we measure this, of let's put these near Costco's as well and look at those store over store performance, versus that same place before, as well as other places that have performed similarly to that do not receive any of these additional out-of-home pieces. And it's simple, but I mean, that's essentially what holdout testing is.
Right.
And trend watching it is really important. And to your kind of like Preston, CFO versus CMO conversation, it's a stake in the ground for your brand, that allows people to see you in a little bit of a different light. It's not a, an ad while I'm trying to watch a YouTube video about something completely different. It's, hey, I'm in my car, I'm listening to Pink Pony Club, and I'm going to Costco, and I just saw this thing, and now I see these people selling this. I'm just associated with it. It's awareness, and it's also a little more organic, at least. I think it's really important for D2C to find a way in the physical world to appear, because, the biggest D2Cs on the planet, I still tell people where I work, and they're like, oh, Hexclad, huh? Is that like all clad? I'm like, dang it. Well, like, now you're going to get hammered if you have an Instagram because you've been near me for about 5 seconds. But, the fact that our awareness, being the size that we are, is still low enough to where plenty of people may not know who we are, I think begs the question of, like, well, is maybe not everyone on Facebook in the way that D2Cs would like? E-com is still a funny little footnote on the epic behind that is all retail. It is a very small percentage of the American wallet that ends up in D2C versus retail brands, even just category to category, groceries, to cookware, to apparel. It's still very, very small. And this is kind of a nice, gentle way to creep into kind of the traditional world and give people a different note.
You kind of hit on a little bit of what we've heard from some clients about digital ad fatigue, and that being inundated with, just like you said, the ads on Facebook, email, Instagram, just almost zoned out. And you even talked a little bit about that before, with that, like, almost that subconscious brand exposure where, and this is what we talk about with out of home, is it's similar to maybe paid search. You're not turning that on and off every day. It's an always on channel that you're tweaking and adjusting. But same thing with out of home. It's brand exposure, kind of like, to use one of those 95-5 examples, like 95% of the market's not ready to buy at a certain point, but those additional exposures that they see your brand and they remember that, and whatever the number, whatever, it's in the hundreds now of how many exposures someone needs to have before they remember your brand. When they are ready to buy, or when they do go by that Costco, or they see one of your ads, that, that's the trigger for them to be able to go back. So, like, yeah, I think, all the topics you guys have been just talking about, it all comes roundabout to that mix of science and art that I think you guys at Hexclad, I think, are crushing it with. But we see the ability with out of home to be able to complement that. Camo, I guess I want to ask you a question, because obviously you get it, you understand omni-channel, about, like, trying to fit into different, just to be exposed to your audience in the places they live, work, and play. But did you consider, as you brought out of home into the mix, did you and your team consider executing that on your own internally?
We thought about it, and I think that's it's very Hexclad for us to try and take it on ourselves, and find the cheapest way to do it, and the most effective way to do it with as little budget as possible. But really, where I was turned into a believer of just going the agency route was in conversations with Greg. The ability for us to have that, like, kind of, this is designed for D2C mentality. I was doing all kinds of analyses to say, like, this is where we kind of want to be. This is where, zip codes that I think would make sense. This is what our audience looks like. And they were able to pull a lot of that together for me in a much more simplified way of, okay, we can put these on the map for you. We've run these with audience tools. We know that these people live here and here and here, and kind of match that with our first party data to say, this is the best place for this to go, and this is how we're going to measure it. And I think going the internal route made me really nervous, because especially in the out of home world, I don't know how many billboards we should have in the city of Chicago in order to get a good read. We know that about our Facebook ads. We know roughly how much we need to spend for creative testing, how we're going to measure a change in our website or changes in creative, but we didn't know that about out of home. And there were a lot of kind of risks and musings internally of like, do we go somewhere where we actually perform well? Do we go somewhere where we perform poorly? Do we go somewhere where we think we should perform well, but we are performing poorly? Is this a population game? Is this an audience game? And agency route really helped us kind of hone in those questions and simplify it. And also, as a lean D2C team, it's a lot of work. I think that's the big thing I discovered was this is not as simple as, plucking a couple of billboards, adding to cart, and then shooting over a photograph. It's a little more complicated than that. And there's a lot of vendors of the actual real estate of the billboard involved. And each of those vendors are kind of different and limited in different markets. And that made it really difficult because I didn't want to go pick one vendor just to get the best price and then be limited on the inventory that I could use. And that's where the agency thing just kind of became a no-brainer, where they were able to work with me on both the plan and then the execution. And this was a big project in Q3 to launch for Q4 for us. And we're really happy with how it turned out. And I think we picked the best markets possible for us, and we're going to get, the best read possible from it at the best time of year.
Yeah. You bring up something really interesting as you're talking about even just inventory selection, right? So going back to the art and the science, that's a critical sort of combo, right? When thinking about out of home, because it is the physical world, and knowing the dirt, knowing the markets. And that was one of the first things I learned in commercial real estate. You got to know the dirt, right? And that's something that is critical. And knowing how much to spend in a given market to drive a specific outcome, and the combination of format types to be able to actually do that. And that does take, a ton of data. You saw we use, we ingest 35 different data sources, right? Just to get to proper inventory selection, layering in your audience data, your consumer data, those physical movement patterns from one retail location to another location, and then identifying what are the highest indexing formats that will reach that audience, the highest percentage of that audience with a certain amount of frequency. And then those things together will help understand and essentially tell you, hey, here's how many impressions we need. That equates to a certain amount of dollars. We need a lot of data for that. But then there's also, are these premium locations, right? Hexclad is going after a specific kind of audience. So brand safety is critical, right? And that's where some of the art comes into play, is where are their locations, right? And we rate every single billboard, every single bus shelter. So it goes 0 to 10, 10 being the best. And there's this really cool machine learning algorithm that we use. And even some of it's manual so that we know what's behind it. What is the billboard literally on top of, right? Brand safety guidelines for a brand like yours. And that is critical. No matter what the data says, the data might suggest this billboard, but it's blocked by a tree. That's out. Doesn't matter how well that indexes for your audience, that's out. So it really is that combination of both, to your point. Out of home is this beautiful medium. And I'm telling you, I never thought I'd be selling billboards. Just given the background, my co-founders, the network that I had, never in a million years. But it is such an unbelievable fun medium to use because you get to leverage audience plus context, right? You talked about digital ads. Like you don't really know where the audience is actually receiving that ad on their phone. You don't know where they actually physically are. I always use this example. Someone might be in the bathroom. They really don't care about Hexclad in that moment, right? For lack of a better example. But you're able to use physical locations near a Costco, for example. And you can leverage creative to sort of play on that, right? So you're using those moments in time, those micro moments, if you will, to influence that audience. And that's where out of home is just so unique. And then the other thing, and I'd love to sort of hear your thoughts on this too, is this sort of revert back to that creative part of marketing, right? That fun part of marketing that we all kind of like grew up on, that I'm not saying we lost along the way in the sort of dollar in, $3 out era, but I'm excited to see that more and more. And we're seeing a ton of it. Doing something that's fun, doing something that's memorable, doing something that will get you earned media, doing something that's going to have that social amplification. That's what this medium is all about. Plus the fact that now we can measure it, and now it could be super data driven. So, and I think you guys nailed it with your creative, because that's a big component of it, right? At least 50% of the success is going to come down to that creative. And we've seen bad creative, and we advise on that, right? Because doing out-of-home creative is inherently different than digital. And that's a big step for a lot of folks who have never done it.
Yeah, and I think the locations and inventory, as well as that like fun part and the physical world part, all kind of like pithy anecdote maybe. But the requirement for out of home to really understand your audience and not what you want it to be. Like you touched on brand safety a little bit, and I think that one is maybe less brand safety, but like what is my brand is what's going into a lot of people's minds of like, oh, hey, we run a makeup company. We're crushing it in DTC. We really want to try out of home. Let's go to New York. And it's like, okay, well, is that just because it's big, or is it because you think you fit there? Is it because you think you already perform well there? And like, that was a huge piece of our learnings, is we were looking state by state originally. And that's how we were picking a market. And we had picked these states, and I was looking at it, I was like, I just naturally picked the biggest city in that state to say, this is the one we should do. And come to find out, took me a long time, but it was like, all right, let's go to the zip code level and really see where these people are. And it's the suburbs, and we're premium, and we're luxury, but we're attainable. We're the Coach store in the mall. We're not the Hermes store in Vegas. It's very much, this is the everyman's product, but it's something that you kind of want for, instead of just something you're, picking up at the grocery store. And that finding was really driven by our want for out of home to work. I didn't want to go and spend the money in New York City to have 10 billboards in Manhattan, when most people live in, 700 square feet, or it's a ridiculously low average. And they don't have room for a 12-piece set in that kitchen. And if that's what we're trying to sell to you, well, we probably shouldn't be in Manhattan. We should be in Long Island. Yeah. And go somewhere where there's square footage. Same thing with Chicago. Like, maybe not Chicago, but what about Naperville? What about Buffalo Grove? And oh, looky here, it's a lot cheaper over there too. You're not competing with eyeballs in the same way, probably more similarly to what you're seeing online or on TV. You're competing with Nationwide and Geico and Snoop Dogg, and I'd rather be competing with, whatever law firm is advertising on your highway that you've been desensitized to. But to that point, I think what really made me want to do out of home was the fact that I know 5 different lawyers' names in the city of Denver where I live, and I know exactly what they do and what their specialty is, because they are everywhere. It is just out of home city. Frank Azar, the strong arm. I'll never forget it. That guy is just every billboard all across I-70. And for a while, it was like, oh, it's so annoying. I can't believe these lawyers do this. But then for a brief moment, I was like, wait a minute, this probably works really well. Because if I were to get in a car accident, I would immediately think of Frank Azar, the strong arm. And that's kind of what you're doing with out of home, is you're putting a flag down in an actual city, and you're saying everybody here needs to know who we are. And in our case, we're not available in every grocery store or in every home goods store. If there's a Costco location, there's a great chance we're going to be there within 30 to 45 days. But it's also going to give you a different impression the next time that you get targeted digitally. And once you're in market and you're thinking about it, I know that that's going to come up. And that's also the part of kind of this measurement advertising, this ROAS based advertising that becomes kind of cyclical and problematic, is it's not necessarily about what ad people are buying on. It's about when people are ready to buy, which thing do they remember? And depending on where you are in the cycle, like I think Americans know very little about insurance, but we know who provides it, because you only really buy it one time. And once you're ready to, that's where knowing the nationwide jingle pays the bills for whatever ad agency is coming up with those. It is a consideration thing, and you want to be a part of it in a more personalized way than just hammering people over their phones and mobile screens and computer screens.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, you mentioned something. It's kind of planting your flag in the ground. What out of home helps brands to do. I mean, brands are, when they do out of home, you become inevitable. And I love thinking about it that way, because that is your sort of welcome moment, right? We are here. We're here in a big way. We are legitimate, and we're here to stay. I did not mean to rhyme all the time, but I just did. And my 7-year-old and my 5-year-old would be very proud of me. But that's what out of home can do. And you also mentioned something critical, which is, and look, one of our mantras here is when we work with D2C brands or B2B brands, look, if you're going after a premium audience, everyone always wants to do New York City. Everyone wants to do Chicago and San Francisco, LA. That's great. Your audience is going to be there. But to your point, number one, it can be expensive. And that's not the point in out of home, right? We don't necessarily want you to spend as much money as humanly possible. We want it to be efficient, and we want it to be accurate. So to your point, look, first of all, we're doing Denver, right? Denver's an excellent market. That's not New York City. That's not San Francisco, LA, and Chicago, where your dollar can stretch further. And using data, not only your first party data, but also all the data that we have at our disposal, for example, identifying, guess what? Like, your audience is actually there also. You don't have to spend as much there. Identifying the suburbs as the opportunity, not downtown Manhattan and Times Square, right? Where you're competing for eyeballs in the most distracting market on planet Earth. So to your point, that's kind of the balance. We'd rather you be smarter, spend less, quite frankly, and get more for it. As long as we can help identify that, guess what? Like, your audience is actually in this market. And that's what all this data that we're talking about helps us to do, which is awesome.
Greg, both of you just covered a number of assumptions that we hear sometimes from brands that have never done out of home before. The budget, we need to be in the big cities, like just time of year. Can you talk about measurement? We haven't really gotten into how we do that, or how that could be done. But Greg, could you just chat a little bit about any of these other assumptions that might be there for someone who's a D2C marketer or B2B marketer? It doesn't matter, but who's never done out of home and thinking, well, yeah, it's old school, or it can't be measured, or I need to be like a lawyer, like you said, Cam, on the side of the road. But other assumptions that we've heard that you've heard since you started the company.
Absolutely. So it goes back to even just the ability to use data to plan a campaign. Most folks don't realize there's a ton of data now to be able to identify down to the zip code level where your audience is. And that's based off of consumer behavior, basic demographic data. I mean, when I say that, I mean actually more real-time, up-to-date data. Like, where is your audience today, right? Down to physical movement patterns, right? And leveraging things like real estate data, identifying those points of interest, those retail locations if you sell to a retailer. For B2B companies, Cam, they usually are targeting specific accounts, right? So that's sort of their version of, the specific point of interest. So number one, not even realizing, marketers don't even realize they can layer in audience data that they're used to on other digital platforms to even plan the out-of-home campaign. Number two, the misconception or not fully understanding the breadth of inventory types. So that's what's wild about out-of-home. And also, one of the things we realized early on was how fragmented it is. So Cam, you mentioned you want to do a campaign in the greater New York City market, even the suburbs. You have to contact 10, 15, 20 different vendors, because there's so many different companies who own different format types, whether the billboard companies owning bus shelters, wrapping, transit-oriented inventory. They're all different. And that's also the breadth of the inventory options, whether it flies, drives, or floats, and it's a physical ad in the physical world, it's out-of-home advertising. There's a lot. So people don't realize what's even possible, let alone how to access it. And then I think the other two misconceptions, one I talked about, which is you don't have to do tier 1 cities. There are tertiary tier 2 cities that are excellent that you may not even know can be an option for you and for your brand or to reach your ICP. And then lastly is expensive. Now, is out-of-home expensive? It can be, right? By no means do we suggest going in the middle of New York City and spending $5,000 on one billboard, which you wouldn't really be able to get in the middle of New York City, in order to make a specific business impact, right? But you don't also have to spend $500,000. And that's kind of the beauty. And that's why using data coupled with the art, also with people who know the dirt, is critical. It's really to make sure that you are spending enough, right? Not too little, because as marketers, performance marketers who we specialize in working with, we want to make sure that there is stat sig. That means buying enough weight and making sure that you actually can get appropriate, meaningful learnings. But by no means is this, you got to go have, 7-figure budget in order to do out of home, because you don't, right? You can successfully do it for under 50K, quite frankly. And you can do it really, really well and scale up from there. Test it, scale it. And I don't know, Cam, if you thought about that, or if any of those were some misconceptions or perceptions of the industry that you guys had. Curious to kind of hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the hardest part was getting over this like feeling of risk of, hey, if we put a big chunk of budget into this and it doesn't work, I can't do anything about it. And I think in the move fast and break things world of DTC, and particularly like trying to grow really fast or really heavily, you like to hold as many cards as you can and keep as much ammo on you to be able to change and be agile as possible. But that's why, like, I think when we became more comfortable with the long-term notion of, keep it on, feed the funnel. One bad day is not going to break us. One bad month is not going to break us. These are things that we're moving a cruise ship now instead of a jet ski. And in doing so, we wanted to put our flag down and kind of take that risk and see what happened. I think since making that decision to start, we've become significantly more bullish on where out of home can bring us, and all of the different places where we would like to use it. Because I think there's a unique, non-interruptive, but like moment meeting kind of thing that happens with out of home. Like some ideas that we had originally thrown around was like, hey, Chicago Restaurant Week, I want that whole big strip of restaurants that are kind of in that one neighborhood. I want a bunch of billboards in there that say like, could have made that at home. Like in your Hexclad, like that's a different and cheeky way of getting involved. It's, not dissimilar, I guess, to Tostitos showing people watching a football game eating chips and salsa on a TV commercial, where it's like, oh, like they're in this moment, let me show them like what this moment could be. Or I know what their frame of reference is, or their mindset in majority for certain periods of time is going to be when they're on, in this location. Let's tell them, this other thing. And those are just like more conversational, more, part of the neighborhood, part of the group types of marketing messages that are just really hard to get across in digital. And then especially when you blow everything out into aggregate, like you're never really giving one single market that much attention when you're scaling a D2C business. You're not saying like, oh, like New York's doing great, let's make New York-based creative, or somebody's wearing a Yankees hat and whatever. Like, you might do that in the EU where you're going to make a German ad, but we don't really think about it regionally like that. And I think for the Hexclad crew, we know that a lot of our sales come from word of mouth. That word of mouth is partially charged by ads, partially charged by Gordon, mostly charged by having really great customers that love the product and they're sharing about it. And they've found, kind of a friend in the brand, and they trust it and they believe in it, and they like, the voice, they like the style, and it just like fits. And I think you can make more personal outreach in some of the out of home ways, because you're in somebody's locale and you can tailor your message fairly simply to that locale for whatever moment it is, whatever place it is, or place in moment. And that's a really cool and unique thing that you can do. It's like an activation, it's like an event, but you can do it for 8 weeks, always on, and it just sits there and you don't really have to do anything except for measure it. And that's been a really fun foray for us.
That's great, Cam. Thanks. You mentioned measurement, and I'll ask one last question to each of you, but maybe Greg, if you could just for marketers who've never used out of home before, and just how they might think, like, how could you measure out of home? How could you measure billboards or transit ads? One last maybe parting thought for marketers who might be considering out of home, or just how do I fit that into the overall mix? About either measurement or any other thing that they should be considering.
Yeah. One thing, Cam, I will ignore the Yankees hat comment as a Red Sox fan. But that's okay. We can continue to work together. Go Red Sox. But one thing I will touch upon that was actually sort of like a misconception is speed to market. We can be in market, whether it's static or digital, faster than ever before with out of home. And that's one thing that marketers are shy about with out of home. It takes this long lead time. It doesn't anymore, even if it is static. And that is part of just operational efficiency, things that like we've done, but also the industry itself is moving faster. That's massive. On the measurement side, look, out of home typically in the past has been measured based off of kind of that, right? Or impressions. So you buy a billboard, the billboard, you're told, gets 1 million impressions a month. After the campaign runs, you're told you reached 1 million impressions. And as a marketer, it's not very meaningful for my business. So we want to take it a step further. So where the industry is going, and what we do is we capture exposed mobile IDs, all anonymous. But essentially, imagine one of the billboards on I-70 that you're on. We essentially create an area in front of that billboard where someone has an opportunity to see the ad. And we're capturing a percentage of all of the mobile IDs associated with your phone that a human owns that go through that view shed, if you will. They're seeing, or they're in that little area where they can see the billboard. We match that to an IP address, and then within a certain look back window, we're letting you know, did those mobile IDs fire a pixel on your homepage and a thank you for your order page? Essentially directionally helping you understand how out of home contributed to web visits and actual sales. We compare that to a non-exposed group. That's your control group. It's a lookalike audience in the same market. So you're looking at a lift analysis. So you're saying, if we never ran out of home, here's what lift and conversions look like. But since I did, here's that lift over the baseline is. And it's all predicated on those mobile IDs matched to an IP address. That right there, and again, no one's claiming last touch attribution. The attribution game in marketing is going to be the never-ending debate, right? Every channel wants to claim it was me that drove the conversion, me. We know we want to show how we contribute. Without out of home, sales aren't as high. With it, here's what that actually means. And the mobile ID pixel attribution is one way that we do it.
That's great. That's great. Thanks, Greg. Cam, you gave us a lot of really great information about how you think, about how Hexclad thinks, and the trajectory for the company has been incredible. So we can't wait to see even more of that. But any last thoughts for marketers, especially D2C marketers who maybe have been in the same seat you've been, where maybe we should think about out of home, or how do we fit that into the mix? Any thoughts for them?
I think only thought is just take the risk. It's fun. It makes you have to do quite a bit of research on your consumer and where they're located and what they what they think and what they do, where they shop, where they might shop for you. I think it's a good process for humanizing a little bit of your consumer base outside of just, intent-based audiences, and starting to kind of understand what their day looks like, why they're buying you. I know that forced a lot of conversations for us as we made those discoveries of, do we want to be a Manhattan brand, or do we want to be an every suburb, everywhere brand? That was, believe it or not, a really pivotal conversation for us, because I think it forces you to not think about the customer prototype or archetype, but the actual person, and what their day looks like, and where they're going and where they might think of you. And it was a really good exercise, and I've gotten a lot of good feedback from folks, at least in the areas, on both placement and just general sentiment. So we're really excited about it. Give it a whirl.
Us too.
Yeah. Well, thanks. You guys nailed the planning. Obviously, the way you explained that, you thought your team has thought through a lot of the right ways to go about it, and the creative is just incredible. It looks great. So you nailed the science and the art. So thanks, and appreciate both of you guys chiming in and giving some really good insight. Thanks to both of you.
Yeah, Cam, great to talk to you.
Great chatting. Thank y'all so much, and thanks to the whole OneScreen team. You guys have been phenomenal.
Appreciate that, Cam.
Great. Well, thank you so much to our audience for joining us for this session. And then I wanted to give another thank you and round of applause to both Cameron, Charlie, and Greg for this amazing discussion today. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please feel free to take a look at our eTail webinar catalog that is located in our resource center. So with that, I'll bring this to a close. On behalf of OneScreen.ai and the eTail Insights team, we thank you for your time, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.